everybody, I'm Beebs Kelley. Welcome back to another video. Today we are going to discuss something that caught my eye recently in the news. It's something that I haven't really discussed here on my channel very much, hardly at all. And there's good reasons for it, but this now demonstrates a problem that the Sussexes have created inadvertently or somewhat indirectly. As you can see here, this article and several others published this same week says, how did 21 news stories about Prince William and Rose Hanbury get killed? It proceeds and says, the affair has been denied on all sides. Now a forensically detailed investigation has found British newspapers seem to be killing references to it. But that is not a very accurate representation of what is actually going on. Thanks to Harry's often overblown assertions against the press, when an actually genuinely false story is getting shut down through official and proper processes, people now question it. Such is the case with this article here, which is actually really empty of any actual information, written by Tom Sykes. Now, Tom Sykes has a bit of a history with this particular storyline in regarding Prince William's love life. A long time ago, he claimed that when Catherine and William took a short break to their relationship before they got engaged, that William had had a date or two with Rose. No actual evidence of this has ever surfaced or been discussed by literally anybody else, so who knows if it's actually true or not. But Tom has clearly been working this sort of an angle for quite some time, and so perhaps he just used that to sort of further his clicks and enhance this storyline a little bit for his own benefit, because it's clearly a storyline that he is assigned to report on. Regardless, let's back up just a tad in case you're not sure what this whole thing is about. The backstory begins way back before 2016. Rose was occasionally in the gossip columns for society sort of events and things like that, but she was really rarely in the news. Before the Waleses moved into Adelaide Cottage, she and the then Cambridges were sort of neighbors. They lived near one another. And so by most accounts, they had a friendship, at least a neighborly sort of a friendship. Many news outlets apparently overzealously classified Catherine and Rose as super close besties, just the best of friends, really, really good friends. But other articles and more recent articles have said they were never like that close, but they were sort of neighborly friends. The depth of their friendship matters not. They were friendly with one another. There's been a lot of occasions in which they had dinner together or they had an event together. Catherine was attending an event at Rose Hanbury's estate and went with her to a music festival one evening. So they have definitely been in the same circles and have known one another and been at least friendly acquaintances. But the relationship was very much more so between Catherine and Rose. There was never any signs or signals that William was involved in the friendship at all. And in 2017, Rose attended a state banquet and was seated next to Harry. Now, that particular banquet took place when Meghan Markle was already living with Harry, and there were lots of reports that she was quite upset that she was not allowed to attend alongside him. The reason that she was not invited was because she was simply a girlfriend, and this was an official state banquet. She doesn't hold any title or significance at this stage. It wasn't a dinner party. It wasn't so much a social situation, so that's why she wouldn't have belonged. But she was really bent out of shape over this situation. But regardless of Meghan being bent out of shape, the Cholmondeleys and the Waleses had no signs of issue. They have continued to receive invitations to royal family events and important occasions, things like coronations, funerals, etc. The Cholmondeleys are invited. So there hasn't really been any actual evidence of a problem between these two couples. From the palace lens, in terms of that state banquet, you have the royal family selecting a person, being Rose, to sit next to Harry, who was at least somewhat trusted within their circles, a family friend, so to speak, even if not a super duper close one, who was also married. So in a way, they were kind of being kind to Meghan Markle by choosing somebody who would prevent a lot of speculation in terms of like, who is this mystery woman sitting next to Harry? People already kind of knew who Rose was and knew that she was married. So in a lot of ways, it might have been a smart choice to help avoid hurting Meghan's feelings and making it not as awkward for Harry to be seated next to somebody who he had an acquaintance with and who was not single. Optics of Meghan attending with Harry would have been really, really tacky. So it was a good move, and like I said, this is evidence that there were no problems between the Cholmondeleys and the Waleses at this stage or since. For the next couple of years, there wasn't really any news in terms of this particular story, but behind the scenes, apparently certain things were happening, not involving the couples in question, but rather involving the Sussexes. As we have seen the Meg do before, at this point in 2017, the state banquet night, Meghan filed this Rose character in her spite list. The next time any of this dropped onto anybody's radar was in 2019 when these affair rumors suspiciously tried to circulate. Now, I say tried to circulate because this story is false. Let's be completely clear. This is a false story, and news outlets could never verify any information or get any reliable sources or even find any coincidences that could point to the possibility of an affair. So it's very clearly false. And there's more on that to come next. But if you're wondering why or how Meghan is involved in this, let me explain. In September 2018, when she was in the early stages of her pregnancy with Archie, Meghan and Harold attended an alcohol-heavy Soho event. Giles Corrin was also in attendance, who later that same evening or around that same time tweeted out a joke that referenced this supposed affair rumor. Now, he has clarified time and time again that it was a joke. He deleted the tweet. He has gone on record several times, and he is to the point where he is extremely frustrated and annoyed anytime anybody tries to cite him as a source for starting this rumor. Same has happened with other gossip columnists or just gossip sorts of sources that have referenced this affair, have said over and over and over again that they are not serious, they are not an actual source for this, they were joking around, and they did not mean for it to be picked up as a real story because it's not real. Coincidentally, Meghan's longtime best friend, Marcus Anderson, is also friends with Giles Corrin, and he is the link that brought them together. So anyway, in October of 2018, shortly after this trip, Jason Knopf informed Prince William of the bullying complaints against Meghan Markle. A lot of her staff members had been either witnessing her behaving in a way that was not professional and rude, or been subject of her rude actions themselves, and felt that she was being rude to them directly and not professional. His report was that Meghan was bullying the staff members, particularly female staff. This directly led to the February 2019 separation of their offices, where William said, "I would like my staff to be protected from Meghan Markle's attitude, because her attitude was one that was not conducive to a workplace, and constructive criticism and whatnot could not flow readily in that environment." And so in a move to protect his staff, who had been very loyal to him and he felt loyalty to them in return, he separated their offices, meaning Harry and Meghan needed to go and set up their own office and staff. And this was a direct consequence of the bullying report, because when Prince William tried to discuss it directly with Harry, it did not go well. Harry was unwilling to hear any criticism or simply any information in regards to Meghan Markle having room to improve. He was unwilling to hear that, and so Prince William separated their offices. But around this same time is when these affair rumors hit the headlines and tried to pick up speed and just completely petered out. It got nowhere. It went nowhere, because as soon as people started trying to look into it, they found dead end after dead end and found this to be a lie. It was March 2019, less than a month after separating offices, that the Catherine and Rose fell out and aren't friends anymore, and this affair sort of story were trying to circulate in the news outlets. Immediately following that, the Sussexes skipped out on Easter celebrations with the royal family, specifically because the royal family knew that it was Meghan Markle who was trying to leak this false story to press. The motive for Meghan putting this story out was threefold. She was able to get back at Rose, remember the spite list. She was able to attempt to damage or upset William and Catherine, who she was upset with for believing the bullying reports, as well as a plethora of other things. And thirdly, to distract from the very messy and bad press for the Meg, which did include a lot of strange stories surrounding her pregnancy. At this particular stage, she was in her third trimester of the pregnancy. The palace lawyers have told the press, media personalities, and publications that this is a false story and it shall not be published. The fact that lawyers have actually gotten involved on this story tells us two things. Firstly, that it is actually false, because you can't send such letters if the media is reporting on something that is true. If they're stating facts, you can't write to them and say, you're not allowed to publish that. But if it's not true, and it is false, it is a lie, it is fake news, then lawyers are able to send letters. Can't say lies about somebody in the media. And that is the exact problem that the palace run into with the Sussexes in the past. Harry wanted the palace to squash stories about Meghan Markle, including the bullying report allegations. But these were stories that did have facts backing them up. And so the lawyers for the palace could not send out legal notices trying to squash the story because there were actual facts and truth behind it. So Harry got upset that the lawyers wouldn't send out notices to kill stories, and he ignored the fact or was unwilling to grasp the fact that those stories were true and based on fact. Lawyers simply cannot send legal cease and desists, for example, over true and factual things being reported, unless in very narrow circumstances, like, for example, the breach of medical privacy. Whether it's true or not, you can request the information not be published because it has to do with somebody's medical information and thus privacy. But that was not the case when it came to Harry and Meghan. Meghan had negative press because of her actual actions, and they were true. So there was no room for a legal team to ask press to stop publishing the truth. The palace's hands were tied. They simply couldn't because it was true. So this indicates that the stories related to Rose Hanbury are false. The affair rumor is false, and the rumor of a friendship falling out with Catherine is also false. The second thing that this signals to us is that the rumors are malicious enough to warrant legal action. In the past, there have surely been plenty of stories out there published in the press that are false, that the palace is simply not motivated enough to send out a letter to squash it. It's not a big enough deal, it doesn't matter that much, and by sending out legal letters, it might actually draw more attention to the story. And so there's lots of times that there is a false story circulating in a tabloid, for example, especially in a tabloid, that's simply not true. Nothing is done about it because it's just not that big of a deal. But in this case, it is a bigger deal. It's not just Prince William's reputation, which is what a lot of people are referencing, that it's not a good look for William. True, a rumor like that being out and about, whether it's true or not, is a bad look. But it's also hurtful to Catherine, Princess of Wales, but more importantly, bigger picture here, their children. Their children seeing this or hearing it, or even the idea of it, even though it's false, is something extremely painful for them. And for Prince William, who endured the pain of negative press exchanges between his parents, public admissions of affairs, for example, to have these stories going about that are actually false this time, where his children could see or hear or one day find, must have been a very painful and upsetting idea. Not just for the Wales family, but for the other family as well. Before you say, Beebs, this is old news. Who cares anymore? Blah, blah, blah. Because it is back in the news, coincidentally, around this time. The same time in which Harry has gotten massive backlash for accepting an award he does not deserve. And coincidentally, around the same time that Prince Harry has announced an interview about the tabloid lawsuit. Now we see a flurry of articles this same week that these two things have been announced and in the press, casting more doubt on palace PR initiatives, saying who's erasing the Rose Hanbury story, as if it's some sort of scandal or conspiracy. It's presented as if it's some sort of example of the palace and the press canoodling together with this sort of tone that's meant to support Prince Harry's narrative, which is really silly. It's clearly all coming from Camp Sussex, and it's poor journalism on top of all of that. When there is a story that's legitimately false, and responsible news organizations, websites, publications are deleting those stories, it's because that's irresponsible to not delete them. If it is false, and it's been proven to be false, then there is no good reason to keep those stories on your website, only to undermine your journalism, your integrity. It makes no sense. Ultimately, there is no story to the story. The reason why a lot of these articles have been either deleted or edited to remove certain sections is because they contained lies. The publications removing content known to be false are doing so because that's a normal course of action. And for a completely fabricated rumor to have any news stories on it at all is quite irresponsible and does discredit the journalists. While this particular story is very clearly fake, the speculation that Meghan is behind this gossip item has a lot of merit given the timeline and the people who have been involved in it. The very few publications who have not completely erased this story or the sections within articles that reference false information are actually connected to Omid Scobie, who is known to be a very irresponsible writer and an unreliable source on his own, but is also a supporter of Meghan Markle and Harry and has repeated their lies in his own writings many, many times. He frequently passes on and posts completely inaccurate information. Another element to this is that it illustrates how Meghan Markle not only started this whole thing, this whole rumor, but she has passed it on to Harry and he believes her. This is something that we have seen happen time and time again. It's a bit of a pattern, and it causes a lot of trouble. This is where Harry's narrative that the palace is willing to lie for William, but not willing to tell the truth to protect Meghan. This is where it came from. Meghan is Harry's lone source saying the bullying accusations are simply not true. It must be the other way around. This must be tied to racism. The palace should shut down these rumors about bullying and tell people that it's not true. Meghan is also Harry's lone source for this affair rumor, this whole falling out in the friendship rumor. Harry believes what Meghan has told him, and Meghan has told him a lie. And so that means Harry also believes that the palace has taken a legal position of squashing this story that Harry believes to be true. So Harry actually does believe that the palace lied to protect William, when in all reality, in everyone's reality except for Harry's, that's not true. Even Meghan knows the truth, but she's saying lies to Harry. Which also kind of exposes Harry's ignorance to this whole situation and how all of this works. The fact that he doesn't realize that legal notices would not be flying around to kill a story if the story had truth to it. This really did position him to believe the Meg when she claimed that the bullying accusations and other stories were false and that the palace was simply choosing not to defend her. And in reality, the stories were bad for Meghan, but unfortunately were also true. And that is why they weren't able to take legal action to stop the stories that Harry wanted them to. Hopefully that makes sense. It's a big mess. But it is further evidence that Meghan is frequently Harry's one and only source of information on things. He relies on her account of events and then reacts to the world in suit. Where he keeps getting tripped up is that he doesn't realize that the Meg is the one who is wrong, who is lying. This is a theory that has circulated around a lot. It's a very common theory in circles close to the people in question, and it's a concept that a lot of people of the public have been watching play out and believe is true. Generally, I try to stay away from talking about things that are purely speculation, purely rumor, until there's a little bit more evidence behind it, a little bit more to the rumor, substantiated a little bit more before talking about it here. So generally, this is a story I wouldn't be mentioning at all because it's very clearly fake. But because the Sussexes are trying to use it to their advantage at this moment, I find that to be very interesting. They're trying to use it to their advantage from the angle of preferential or different treatment of the Waleses compared to the Sussexes, and they're also trying to use it as a diversion from their bad press lately. Furthermore, there's more to this that reeks of Sussex delusions. For example, these stories have really odd wording that remind people of certain Meg-sourced content. Phrases like impossibly gorgeous are the sort of shallow and out-of-place details that Meghan and her media connections, like Omid Scobie, tend to use. Not serious journalists, but rather a sensationalist approach that's designed to maximize their impact and stir the pot as much as possible. Or the fact that it keeps being claimed that the palace started putting out anti-Sussex stories to keep this story quiet. The timeline on that doesn't really fully add up. But also, the palace didn't need to divert attention at all. They simply squashed that story because it was false. The Rose story is false, so they squashed it. And they had grounds to do so, legal grounds to do so, so there was no need to try to come up with something else to feed the media. That doesn't make sense. And the timeline of this happens, it actually makes much more sense that Meghan Markle put out these stories to divert press attention away from her bad press surrounding Archie's birth, the pregnancy, and the bullying allegations. Now, the real question is, why are the Sussexes still trying to push this narrative and this claim that negative stories about them were only planted to distract from this Rose story? Why are the Sussexes still trying to say that 2019 stories that do have merit to them are retaliations against them? What does it matter at this point? It all ties back to this ITV documentary and this case that Harry's trying to bring against the tabloids. He's trying to use this as an example still, that these stories were planted to distract from this story about William, when it's the exact opposite that we can see with the evidence and the timeline of things for ourselves. But perhaps more importantly, this story involving Rose is false, and it's always been fake news. And when legitimate news organizations pull stories referencing it, it's because it's irresponsible to have fake stories found on your website. It now spurs its own set of problems and conspiracy, and this problem is largely due to the Sussexes' own lies about the palace and PR tactics. Since Harry and Meghan never provided evidence or examples, the public is left to speculate and question. Big surprise, the Duke and Duchess of fake news made things worse once again. But what do you think about these theories, about Harry's angle to this, Meghan's involvement in this story? Be sure to leave it in the comments. I'm sure it'll be a very interesting discussion. Thank you so much for joining me for today's video. I hope you have a very happy day ahead, and I will see you next time. Bye!